When you become a podcaster, it's very rare that you sign on to become a digital marketer or a HR person, or someone that needs to negotiate contracts and deal with sponsors. Heck, barely anyone signs on to become a podcaster in order to become a business person. But very, very often, the second that you start influencing people, you do become something else. You become more than a podcast. You become a brand. You do eventually become someone that transacts with other people. Ergo, you become a business. And so as part of the podcaster's journey, we have to understand things like technical jargon, certain things that crop up probably a little further down the line than many podcasters have got, certainly many new podcasters. But eventually you're going to come across digital terms like bounce rate. And that's one thing that I got an email about last week from a great friend of mine, a super podcaster. And they were saying, Marco, listen, son, I've got this podcast, it's great, and I've got my website, which is great, I really like it, but my bounce rate is high. What can I do about it? So I thought, I'm going to record an episode on this. So today on the Podcast Accelerator, I'm going to talk about 3 ways to quickly lower your podcast website's bounce rate, and also just really tell you a little bit about what bounce rate is. I'm Mark Asquith, host of the Podcast Accelerator and CEO and co-founder of Rebel-Based Media, where we make technology platforms for podcasters just like you. We make Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host. So if you're looking for a podcast host that looks like it was built in 2020, that has a support team that treats you like a human being, then maybe you should give it a little whirl for 7 days totally free at Captivate.fm. Also, before we dig into bounce rates, another part of the digital marketing mix for any podcaster worth their salt is, of course, email marketing. And you know that my show is brought to you by AWeber, the email marketing platform of choice for me and the Rebel-Based Media team. And AWeber, the team there, Brandon, Chris, Jenna, they help us to generate revenue through our businesses. And you should be doing that as a podcaster. Even if you're thinking to yourself, well, Mark, I'm not interested in making revenue yet. At some point, you will probably want to cover your hosting costs, and you maybe want to make a little bit of brass on that thing as well. So you need to be building your email list. You can do that for free for 30 days with all of the education that you'd expect as well at markasquith.com/AWeber. Right, what the heck is bounce rate? Bounce rate is when someone comes to your website and bounces back off it. Essentially, they'll come in from Google, they'll come in from social referrals, they come in maybe even directly by typing in to your website. But if they don't stay on your website, they bounce off it. So it's when someone comes in, they land and they bounce. Okay, that's the bounce rate. And the goal of the bounce rate is to give you an indication of how you are essentially retaining people, because ultimately, the longer someone is on our website, the more chance that we have of asking them to do something that we want them to do, whether that's listen to our trailer for our podcast, subscribe to our podcast, or whether it's something along the lines of getting on our email list, downloading a lead magnet, or maybe even buying something from us. So the lower that bounce rate is, the better chance you have of retaining people and engaging them with other things. But the bounce rate is not something that many podcasters tend to consider because it's a digital marketing metric. It's a metric that you'll see in an analytics platform such as Google Analytics. And it's not one of those things that you're taught about. It's not, it's, unless you're a marketer coming into podcasting or you've got the wherewithal to study digital marketing as a podcaster, it's not something that you're probably aware of. And you become aware of it often very late in the game. So the point that I'm trying to get at here is that it's an important metric, okay? The lower that bounce rate is, the more time people spend on your website, the less they enter your website and bounce back off, okay? So 3 ways that you can lower that. And remember, the goal is to get this percentage bounce rate down, okay? If 10% of people bounce off your website versus 50% or 80%, it means you are retaining more people than who are bouncing, coming into your site, seeing something and leaving again, all right? So we want this number to be as low as possible. So what can you do? Well, first and foremost, you need a real solid user experience plan. Now, this is something that we put inside the Podcast Success Academy. We've got one of these in there that you can use to plan your user experience on your website. I used to do website building. I used to do user experience with my old agency, Hacksaw, before we got into podcasting all those years ago. And the biggest single mistake that people make when it comes to their bounce rate and their overall user experience is actually not planning out from their own perspective what they want that user experience to be and what they want the user to do on that website. Okay, so if you go to markasquith.com and you click on podcasts, when you land on that page, I want you to do one thing, and that is to listen to my trailer. That's it. Sure, you can listen to other stuff, but I want you to listen to my trailer. That is the goal for that page. And every other page has a goal. So I know that to lower my bounce rate, what I need to do is give people the set of actions, not only that I want, but that they want, all right? So that's the first thing that you have to do to lower the bounce rate, is make sure that you are designing and planning out a user experience flow using pen and paper, using some kind of online tool to decide what you want people to do. What is the primary objective of this page? What is the primary objective of any given page on your website? Not just dumping information on there, not just making it look aesthetically pleasing, but actually making it work for you and for the user. So that's tip number one. Make sure you have a plan, a user experience journey map, all right? Number two. Number two is a big one, all right? Whilst our digital world exists on screen, and many designers, many people who build websites will say there is no fold, like in a newspaper, above the fold exists. Many people in digital will say, well, there is no physical fold. Well, of course there's no physical fold. All right, we get off your high horse, technical guys. We know there's no fold. However, there is a fairly relevant set of data that you can get from W3 Schools, or W3, the World Wide Web Consortium, that will tell you the average size of the screens in the world right now. So if the average resolution of a screen is 1280 pixels wide by 1024 high, that 1024 is typically our fold. All right, and that will change as monitors get bigger, and it probably is higher than that already as monitors get higher density of pixels and retina's a thing and so on and so forth. But what I'm talking about here is we need to understand what constitutes the fold on a website, and we need to get, that stuff from the user experience map that I talked about, we need to get that stuff above the fold. The one key action, the one key bit of information that will tell people, here's what is on this page, here's why it's good for you based on why you came to this website, here is why you should stay, that has got to be above the fold, all right? Got to be above the fold. So that is tip number two, plan around that. And I know these are very high-level tips. We'll go into this in more detail in the Podcast Success Academy. We have courses. We've got all sorts of things in there, okay? The third thing that you need to do is make everything legible. Don't be afraid of plenty of white space. Just because there's space on your screen that doesn't have anything in it, it doesn't mean you need to put a picture in there or a logo or have your text sizes too small and have the line height too small. White space is your friend, because if someone lands on your website and sees, wow, this is a lot of information, they're going to bounce. They've got no idea where to look. They've got absolutely no idea why things are so illegible. So what we've got to do is just deliver information in a clear, legible, white space-driven manner, okay? So spacing is your friend, okay? Spacing is your friend. So those three tips, whilst they are quite high level, you can implement them today on your website. We do go into this in more depth at podcastsuccessacademy.com. Go and check that out, but we can always dig into this. If you need a hand with it, if you want to go deeper on this, let me know. Email me. You've got my email address, mark@rebelbasemedia.io. As ever, stay safe. Look after your community. Look after your family, those closest to you, and please take heed of what your governments are telling you to do in these uncertain times. If you need anything from me, that's my email address. I just gave it out, mark@rebelbasemedia.io. And please take care of each other and take care of yourself, all right? And until the next time, thank you for joining me. Never forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.